My guest again today is Andrew Montford.
I'm the director of an organization called Net Zero Watch. We were spun out of a charitable organization in the UK called the Global Warming Policy Foundation, GWPF. GWPF was an educational charity, still is an educational charity. We were spun out of that as its campaigning arm. And in the last year or so, we have become completely separate from them. So we are now, we have separate management board, separate funding, and all that sort of thing. Which, the great thing is, it now leaves us free to really get stuck in there, attacking the insanity of the UK energy system. We focus more on energy than GWPF. GWPF is it has much more of a climate focus. They do much more climate than we do. They do energy as well, but they're about educating the public. We are dealing with policy, with trying to change opinions on where the UK is going with its energy system, which you probably don't need me to tell you, Tom, is not a good direction we're going in at the moment. So we can get into that.
You are having some success, though, right? I was just re-listening to when you were on this podcast about 3 years ago, and you were saying back then that politicians, kind of none of them wanted to speak out against it. That's changing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The change since the last general election 12 months ago has been absolutely astounding. Suddenly, the Conservative Party out into opposition, they now want to talk to us. It was extraordinary. Within just a few weeks of them losing the election, they were getting in touch saying we would like to speak. That has been extraordinary. And then, I guess the bigger thing is that the Reform Party has suddenly shot up in the polls, and they have always been very open that they are opposed to net zero and that they think net zero is insane. And yet now they are leading in the polls. It really is a very different picture we're facing, because the green blob, if you like, the media, academia, and civil service, and the main, a lot of the political parties, they are all sort of looking over their shoulders going, oh my goodness, these people could be in power in a few years' time, and then we're in trouble. If you're an investor in wind farms, and you think there's a reform government coming, you're going to be pretty nervous. But yeah, maybe we should get onto that later. The thing that we have been working quite hard on is countering the arguments that our very high electricity prices in the UK are something to do with gas prices. Now, the thing that I have spent quite a long time doing over the last 12 months is getting into the data published by an organization called Ofgem, the Office of Gas and Electricity Markets. The Office of they regulate. They're a regulator. So we have regulated energy markets in the UK. They're not strictly free. So in particular for electricity, Ofgem regulates retail prices. So there is a price cap, essentially. And what I've discovered is that in the data they publish to go alongside that is essentially the full story of why our electricity prices are so high. So this is the cost of making the electricity that goes into a UK consumer's bill. Okay. This is actually not even what you might call the wholesale cost, because the wholesale cost includes carbon taxes. So this is okay. Let's take out the carbon taxes and see just what the electricity costs. And as you can see, we have this enormous spike in 2022, and this is what leads to, if you like, the green blob telling us that is the cause of your high electricity prices. Now, what caused that spike was two things. One thing was gas prices, certainly, because we had the Nord Stream sabotage, okay, which reduced the supply of gas to Europe. Now, the thing is, the UK doesn't actually get much gas from European markets, or from EU markets. We get our gas mainly from Norway. There's a pipeline running to Norway, and there is we get a lot of LNG from your side of the pond. Okay, so that was definitely one factor. In fact, probably a bigger factor was the fact that the French nuclear fleet was out of commission at the time. They were essentially, their nuclear regulator was very worried that they had sort of age-related sort of failures on the horizon, and essentially told them told all the operators to take down the whole fleet and check that everything was okay. So the whole French nuclear fleet was out. That was a huge factor. Another factor was that the wind wasn't blowing very hard in 2022. 2022 was a wind drought year. So that again meant that the wind turbines weren't producing much. So that produced up a surge in electricity prices. So what this meant was that we had this really unlikely combination of circumstances which pushed prices up, but it was temporary. So you can see that prices have come right back down again. And where they are now, this graph is bang up to date with the latest price cap. You can see it's really only a whisker above where it was 10 years ago. This graph is corrected for inflation. So I'm talking here in real terms, and all the graphs I'm going to show you are have that correction through. So in real terms now, gas can't be the reason why our electricity prices are so high. So if I move on to the next graph, now how do I do that on here? There we go. So this is all the other things that go into your electricity bill. So that is to say, policy, what we might call policy costs. So that is essentially carbon taxes. It's subsidies for wind and solar, and there's a variety of sort of smaller things that electricity suppliers in the UK are made to put insulation into poor people's houses. So that has a cost too. So that's in there in that green line at the bottom. So that is mostly about net zero. That's the important thing to understand. Most of that is net zero related. The red line is network costs. So that is the cost of managing all the wires and cables. So that's the transmission grid and the distribution grid. And it's also balancing costs. So that's the cost of dealing with intermittency of renewables. So most of that is paying wind farms to switch off. Okay, because what we do is people build wind farms in places where there is inadequate transmission capacity to get the electricity to market. The wind farms are all in the sea off the coast of Scotland. They do this deliberately because they can earn more money being paid to switch off than they can selling electricity. So because essentially, if you probably know, Tom, that if supply and demand aren't equal on an electricity grid, the grid falls over. So essentially, in a way, what the wind farms are doing is saying, a nice electricity grid there, it would be a pity if something bad happened to it. You better give us some money. It's a protection racket, if you like. So, that's what that red line is. So the balancing costs are going up. Essentially, if you go back 20 years, the balancing costs were almost, they were negligible. And they're now, more than £2 billion a year. So, and that's mainly when switching wind farms off. But also, we're throwing money at the transmission and distribution grids to get so that we can try and get more power to market. That carries a cost too. The supplier costs is the blue bit at the top, and that there's costs in there related to the electricity price crisis. So they had to essentially allow suppliers had all got their hedges wrong. So they were in a dire financial straits. They were all going bust, and so they allowed them to increase the prices to fix that. So that's why you see that spike in the middle of that. So But yeah, I guess the big picture is we have this long increase in electricity prices, in if you like, the overheads on top of your electricity prices. So that is why electricity prices in the UK are going up. And you can see that it's pretty much a monotonic increase. So if we carry on going the way we're going, we can expect that element of the bill to keep going. I mean, the other element, the direct element, will go up and it'll go down. But you actually go back and look at it. It was largely stable in that previous graph, apart from the spike. Whereas this is a steady increase. So this is the breakdown of the bill today. So you can see that if you look at this dark blue segment here, this is the electricity itself. It's only just over 25% of the bill. Everything else is add-ons. So more than half is the green stuff, the subsidies. Sorry, more than half, more than a quarter, I should say, is the green stuff. So subsidies, carbon taxes, that sort of thing. And then all this as well is, you can't say that the red bit, the network costs, is all net zero related, but the increases in it is net zero related. And then you've got the supplier costs. So you can see the green stuff is adding a huge amount to the bill. Now, this shows a different way of looking at this. This is, look, there's the bill 10 years ago. So in real terms, 10 years ago, somebody was paying £600 for an electricity bill. Now on the right, it's nearly £900. So it's gone up by nearly half. And this is why it's gone up. The gas, the direct cost, the electricity isn't any more expensive. The increase is mostly about increases in subsidies, and it's paying wind farms to switch off, upgrading the network, and yeah, there's a little bit on the supplier too. So what people are being told in this country is just a lie. It is really nothing to do with gas anymore. In 2022, in the middle of that electricity price crisis, yes, you could say that gas was a factor. It's not the only factor, but a factor. Now it's all about the green stuff. So I think that's the end of that. Yeah, so I will stop sharing that and we can talk again. That is, if you like, the big factor that we have brought to the argument now. And this is unarguable, really. Those are official figures. There's only one element of it where, you have to actually try and estimate, and that's the amount of the carbon tax. But it's a pretty straightforward calculation and nobody's going to argue about it. So I don't get any pushback on this. It's quite interesting. You can put the numbers out there and you can say, look, it's the official numbers. You can go and check them to the official sources and they agree to the penny. So, there's no argument about it. And that has put people on the back foot, if you like. The other side are on the back foot. So, yeah, that's been big progress.
So it really does surprise me that the direct cost, as you showed there, is about a quarter of the total cost, and the green costs are they're bigger than that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it is astonishing. So what is quite interesting here is where is this going to go in future? Okay, so that is a big factor, a big political hoo-ha at the moment, if you like, because the government they've announced a plan to essentially try to finish off decarbonizing the electricity grid by 2030. Now, the first thing to say about that is it's fantasy. It would be an astonishing increase in the deployment of renewables compared to what's gone in what we've seen for the last 20 years. They'd be adding more in the next 5 years than they've put in the last 20. There's not enough engineers, there's not enough capacity in the networks, everything else. It's just not going to happen. But one thing you can say for sure is it's going to put prices up. So, okay, it might not be delivered in 2030, but if it was delivered in 2040, say, an interesting question then is, well, okay, what's that going to do to electricity prices? So Net Zero Watch published a paper probably 6 months ago now, I would think, by Professor Gordon Hughes, who is an extremely eminent energy economist. He's now emeritus from the University of Edinburgh, former advisor to the World Bank. He is probably, one of the UK's top energy system modelers. He reckons conservatively that when that plan has been delivered, we will see a further 60% increase in retail electricity prices. Now, we already have pretty much the most expensive electricity in the world. So it's 25 pence a kilowatt hour. So what's that? Sort of, getting on for 30 cents a kilowatt hour, that sort of level. And it's going to go up by 60%. Now, that won't be anything. Well, no, it will be something to do with the price of the electricity, but it's mainly to do with net zero. So there you can look at the factors that drive that. So obviously, lots more wind farms needs lots more subsidies. Now, bringing on all that capacity very quickly is going to run into problems with grid capacity constraints, so we're going to pay more for wind farms to switch off. So we're looking at that cost going up many times over, more wind farms being switched off. There's another factor kicks in there, in that at times now we're seeing the renewables fleet, the wind and solar, delivering or wanting to deliver more electricity than the country needs. Okay, so at that point again, you get into this issue of, well, that can't be on the electricity grid. You have to pay the wind farms to switch off. So that is a whole new factor that's kicking in on top of the issue of the wires not having enough capacity. So that adds a whole new cost. Another thing that's going to happen is, so we have lots of gas-fired power stations in the UK, which essentially decide where the market price is is set, because they're the most expensive thing that has to run. These are the more efficient kind of gas-fired power station. They're called closed cycle gas turbines. Now, these are very good for running essentially as baseload 24/7. That kind of thing. They're not so good at running intermittently. And our grid is now at the stage where there is only intermittent generation quite a lot of the time. So essentially nobody wants to build new ones. So that's driven the cost of our electricity up, our wholesale electricity, because our fleet is very old. But it's also reaching the end of its life. So we need new ones, but nobody's going to build the efficient ones. They're going to build what's called open cycle turbines, which are much better for running intermittently, but are much less efficient. So that's going to put the wholesale cost of electricity up. Because they're less efficient, they burn more carbon. So they're going to need more carbon permits, those carbon taxes we talked about. Okay, that's going to put the demand for those up. Okay, which will put the price up, so that there'll be higher carbon taxes on the electricity too. And it goes on and on and on. And that's why the prices are going to go up so much. So this is going to be an economic catastrophe for the UK. I mean, the economy will not handle electricity prices at 40 pence per kilowatt hour. That will be the end of our manufacturing. Our manufacturing has largely gone already. We've lost pretty much all our steel manufacturing, pretty much all of our aluminium. There is no fertilizer manufacture in the UK anymore. The car manufacturing, motor cars, that industry is starting to close down quite quickly. Chemicals are in dire straits. They're probably going to. And again, of course, all this leads on to all sorts of other wider economic problems. The tax take's gone down. The deficit's increasing, etc., etc. So What has been quite interesting in the last week or so is that the Reform Party we talked about earlier, who are net zero skeptic party, have written to all the companies that develop new offshore wind farms. Most of our wind capacity is going in offshore, and they've said to them, "Do not build any more." Essentially, and if we get into power, it will be dire straits for you if you have built any more. You will lose your money. Was the strong implication, which has been a joy to behold, frankly, because the Green Blob had an absolute meltdown. You can't say this, da-di-da-di-da. But I think they are still not at the situation where they have grasped just how serious the situation is. That it will be a catastrophe if this plan to fully decarbonize the grid by 2030 goes ahead. It will just be a disaster. And there's not enough money in the exchequer as there is. We are probably heading for sovereign debt crisis at some point. And if we do Clean Power 2030, as the plan's called as well, it's certainly a sovereign debt crisis. So the Reform Party have probably just saved the country a lot of money. Gordon Hughes, when he did his report, suggested it was going to be £25 billion a year by the time the plan was finished. So we're talking, assuming we build up from where we are now to that sort of extra cost in 2030, well, it would be saving every household in the UK perhaps £2,500, so $3,000 or something. It's a very considerable sum of money. So yeah, this has been good, and I think I hope it's done the job. That the wind farms will now back off and start thinking about their long-term interests. There's a very interesting point here that if we are heading for an emergency, then all bets are off. Frankly, if you built all those wind farms, and step back a bit. The only road out of a crisis like that is to get back to cheap energy. Okay, now, and the only route back to cheap energy is to close down the wind farms. Literally close them down. You can't just stop paying them subsidies. You actually have to close them down if you want to get back to where electricity prices should be. Okay, because the renewables impose costs on the system as a whole. Okay, so all those things like paying them to switch off, those are costs. But it's also costs like when you've got wind and solar on the grid, nobody wants to build any more gas-fired power stations. So as well as this sort of price crisis that we're facing, we're also facing the potential for brownouts because we won't have enough firm capacity. Okay, so when the wind doesn't blow, are we going to have enough gas-fired power stations to fill the gap? Quite probably not. We have a very large number of gas-fired power stations that were built in the 1970s. Okay, gas-fired power stations don't really make it past 30 years old, so they need to be replaced as a matter of urgency. Now, the lead time for a gas-fired power station now, because all you Americans are building them to power your AI, the lead time's now 8 years. So we need them like much quicker than that. So yeah, there's a brownout possibility coming. But the other thing is, you'll remember we had the blackout in Spain a few weeks ago. Okay, that's renewables again. Renewables destabilize the electricity grid. It is much harder to keep a grid up and running without big rotating masses, which is to say gas-fired power stations, coal-fired power stations, nuclear power stations. Okay, wind, solar don't do that. they try to correct that with clever electronics. And, in the UK, at least, it's so far so good. We've had no nationwide blackout, but we did get one blackout back in 2019 that took out a very large chunk of the east of England. I mean, it was millions of people affected, and that, if you read between the lines of the official report, was essentially down to a lack of gas-fired power stations on the grid and too much renewables. So 3 crises that we're facing: price, brownouts, and blackouts. There's an emergency coming. In those circumstances, I think investors in renewables risk losing their shirts, because the only way out is to close them down. Now that is very, very hard, of course, because these people have contracts. There are international treaties that protect them. Now, I'm no lawyer. I don't know what the answer to this is, but in an emergency, I'm assuming that there will be a court might look at the overwhelming public interest in getting out of renewables, to allow governments to essentially cut corners, if you like. It's a question for a lawyer. You need to get a good lawyer on this podcast, Tom, and ask them that question.
So one thing that gives me hope for the UK is this Richard Tice letter from just a few days ago. I'm looking at right now his tweet. He tweeted out this letter, and in the tweet he said, "Net stupid zero is ruining our countryside and economy." And that post has 1.3 million views. That makes me very happy.
It made me happy too. It really did set the cat among the pigeons. I don't know what you think about the net stupid zero thing. I just think it gets attention. It's sort of, it's good in a slightly clunky way. You go, well, that's slightly clunky, but it is stupid. Whereas a lot of people just don't like it because it's not slick enough. But you can say what you like about the Reform Party. They are very good at PR, at getting attention, at getting the message out there. I mean, they take a lot of criticism for not being policy focused enough. And I think that's, I get the impression from what I hear around, from around Westminster, that there are sort of organizations around the Reform Party that are sort of coming into being that are going to fix that problem. So I hope that problem gets fixed. But you have to sympathize with these guys. There are, they've got 4 MPs now. They had 5 at one point, but they seem to keep falling out with each other. But they have 4 MPs. It's very difficult to do everything that needs to be done with that number of people. I mean, in the UK, parliamentary parties get what's called short money. It's government money to run your party. It's like, because we don't have the same culture of everybody giving to political parties that you have in the States. There is government funding of it, but they changed the rules a few years ago to say that if you had, I think it was fewer than 6 members of parliament, you didn't get any. So Reform are just below the threshold, so they will get none. So they have very little money. They have very few MPs, but my goodness, they are making an impact, and they've changed the conversation. It is now, before, people who were against net zero could be completely ignored by the media, and most of the media did. And now they have to take these conversations seriously. I mean, my goodness, this is how strange it's got. The BBC actually did a program on whether gas was raising electricity prices the other day, and they did speak to me, although they seem to have ignored everything I said, including the official data. So they still told their viewers that it was all down to gas. But at least we're talking about it now. It's a step forward, I think.
So do you think the average voter in the UK has some opinion on net zero, that they know something about it?
I would say my guess is that less than half are sort of even aware of it. I think we are because the media's broken down quite a lot and people are off watching Netflix and that sort of stuff. And you know, that thing where we all used to sit around the radio at 6 o'clock and listen to the BBC telling us what the truth was, that's gone. And I think there are people who just live their lives without any current affairs input at all. You know, obviously newspapers have gone too. Yeah, but I think it's growing. I think people are asking why. People are aware that their bills shot up, and they understand that, you know, they'd all heard, you know, they'd seen they've heard about the Nord Stream pipeline going up, and they say, okay, I understand that, but they're going, well, why haven't my bills come down again? You know, that was 3 years ago now, and I think, you know, they are asking the questions, and I think we are getting through there in terms of convincing them that, you know, you can't blame gas anymore. The gas price has come down; it's back to where it was 5 years ago. So it must be something else, and that something else is net zero.
So this incredibly stupid idea that the UK can prevent bad weather by spending all this money, it didn't come from voters, or who did it come from, or who do you think is pushing the hardest for it still?
Well, this is an interesting question. I actually wrote an article a couple of weeks ago, which hasn't been published yet, but I was asked to write about the stuff I used to do sort of 10 years ago about the corruption of climate science. And I think it starts back there, you know, so, you know, the hockey stick and all this kind of stuff, and the scaremongering that came from the IPCC. And you know, that sort of led on to this sort of politically driven push. I mean, you know, it was climate as a weapon to beat the capitalists with, and you know, that has certainly been a factor. But I think it's now gone beyond that into the scaremongering has taken hold on society as a whole. So there are a lot of people out there who genuinely believe that net zero, that we're facing climate catastrophe. And, you know, this has become a cult, you know, in the proper sense of the word. You know, they are driven by this millenarian fear that the world is going to go up in smoke and you know, there's going to be wildfires and hurricanes and droughts. And I had somebody on X today tell me that, you know, we're all going to die of oxygen poisoning or some, no, lack of oxygen. That's what it was, because of climate change. And you can't talk rationally to these people, but that has taken over society. So we're going on and doing, net zero is a response to that. That net zero is an irrational response to an irrational fear. And you can't, what is the famous saying? You can't rationalize somebody out of an opinion into which they didn't rationalize themselves in the first place. So you can try to explain to these people that there's nothing in the IPCC reports about, you know, people dying of lack of oxygen or droughts or floods or anything else, and that the impacts are rather you know, small and manageable, and they just don't care. They're just saying, but we're all going to die. I mean, the thing that the tactic that we take now is that we don't really get into the climate at all, because it's the ordinary punter out there doesn't understand radiative physics. You know, that it's just, you know, their eyes glaze over and they go, look, the scientists say this, I believe the scientists. And okay, you and I will go more for you, but you know, in our view at Net Zero Watch, we don't need to go there. It's like, okay, let's accept that and say, okay, what's global warming going to cost to us? And, you know, there's this thing called the social cost of carbon, how much damage a ton of carbon dioxide is going to cause. And okay, we'll take that. We'll take the official views on that. And most you know, estimates are sort of, you know, around £50 a ton. And, you know, you can say, okay, fine, I'll give you some leeway. Let's call it £100 a ton. And then you compare it to what net zero is going to cost. Well, I mean, you can compare it first to what net zero has actually cost so far. So in terms of decarbonizing the electricity grid, up to about 2019, so that was the last, when the paper that I'm referring to, which was by a chap called Harnison, he estimated the cost for decarbonizing electricity grids across Europe The UK, it was about £200 a tonne by 2019. So we're spending twice as much as the damage we're trying to prevent. And you're going, okay, this is clearly irrational, isn't it? I mean, if the costs outweigh the benefits, you don't do it. And you can but you can tell these people till you're blue in the face that, the costs outweigh the benefit. And they say, but, oxygen starvation. No. The impacts of climate change are in the social cost of carbon. It's all in there. We're just accepting the official view, and they don't care. Oxygen starvation. This is what we're up against. And I'll tell you an interesting story. So this is coming back to the this article I wrote. There's a very interesting parallel to this. I mean, I say interesting, probably horrifying parallel is probably a better way of putting it. So in South Africa in the 19th century, there was a cult took over the Xhosa tribe. I think you actually say the Xhosa tribe, but that's the cult took over. It was sort of led by a sort of a girl prophetess, sort of a Greta Thunberg kind of character, who convinced them that if she convinced them that if they slaughtered all their cattle, which was the basis of their economy, and burned down all the granaries, that everything would be miraculously reincarnated and the good life would return. And so they did it. And she was mistaken, shall we say. But this is what happens when a cult takes over your society, and that, I think, is what we face now. We have these people doing crazy things regardless of the cost, and you only have to look at our Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, Ed Miliband, to realise he is quite insane, in my view, absolutely insane, and he is a wild-eyed zealot, an extremist, a madman, and he is just he doesn't care what the costs are. He doesn't care what harm is done to people. He just believes that this is going to lead to salvation. And so, he builds wind farms, and to hell with the fact we're going to pay them to switch off half the time.
I know you want to give them their social cost of carbon thing, but I would like to argue from my side that there's a social benefit every ton of CO2 that's out there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Tom. I really don't. I mean, the problem with the social cost of carbon is that, the estimates span, wait for it, 9 orders of magnitude. So, and there are people out there who are, I think, not unreasonably suggesting that it is big time benefits. So, certainly, I mean, there's quite a famous graph by Ricard Toll, who is, the world's leading expert in this area, and he points out that at the kind of warming that we're at now, it is net beneficial. And I think he is the only person who's actually tried to estimate the position now as compared to where it might be in 20 or 30 years' time. So that is quite an important factor. The idea that it is definitely bad in the future, I think is absolutely correct. But as I say, I just go, well, look, guys, follow the numbers. Even if you accept it's bad, net zero is still insane. So I mean, obviously for people like you and me who thinks it's probably quite good, it's a different story. It's still mad, but it's a different story apart from that. It's a very difficult argument to get through to people, isn't it? This thing of the problems that if they do come are actually really quite, they're not even that difficult to deal with. The one I found this wonderful stuff. So we have the Committee on Climate Change, which is this organization that was set up by the government to tell it what to do about decarbonizing the economy, and they're all green nutters. But anyway, they did this report which broke down what the costs of unabated climate change would mean for the UK. And they went up to 4 degrees of warming. So, they're trying pretty hard to come up with something scary. And it's like, I can't remember what the numbers were, but it was a fraction of what we're currently spending to prevent it. Is the first thing. But then if you actually go and look what the underlying problems that were meant to be causing this economic harm were, well, the two main things were sea level rise and flooding. Now, sea level rise is something that we're pretty good at dealing with. We build seawalls all the time. The first seawall was built, well, the first one we know of dates back to about 3000 BC. So we've had a fair amount of practice at building seawalls. And the beauty of building a seawall is of course, you wait until the sea overtops the one you've got, and then you make it a bit higher, and it's not a big deal. So the Climate Change Committee itself said that if we didn't abate climate change at all, it would cost us 98 billion by 2100. So essentially just over £1 billion a year. I mean, we're spending something like 30 or 40 billion pounds a year in the hope that we can change the weather in 2050. I mean, when was that a sane thing to do? And it's the same for riverine flooding and flash floods and that sort of thing. We do things all the time to mitigate that risk. I mean, the best thing you can do is to not build on floodplains, which is something that we did for many years here and has led to astonishing amounts of flooding. But these are not big issues. It's the power of imagination, isn't it? The idea that people imagine it's going to be absolutely terrible, and when you actually sort of get into the detail, there's nothing there to be scared of. It's Wizard of Oz, I suppose, isn't it?
It is. I'm just looking back at this tweet I put out in October. I was at the Amsterdam airport. I don't know how to pronounce it. Do you know how to pronounce it? Schiphol?
Oh, Schiphol.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a sign there that says parts of it are up to 11 feet below sea level right now. And
that's right. Yeah, that's right. They are really not bothered about they know about sea level rise. I mean, of course, the thing in the UK is that we have glacial rebound going on, and I think the east of the country's going down, and the west of the country's going up, and at much faster paces than sea level is projected to go up in the computer models, if you're fool enough to believe the computer models. But it's just like, well, you've got the little issue and you've got the big issue. Why don't we just focus on the big issue? But that would be far too sensible, wouldn't it?
It would. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the rise of Catherine Porter? Do you think I'm suddenly seeing her around a lot, being interviewed and with a lot of sanity? What do you think?
Yeah, Catherine's great. I've just got so much time for Catherine. She's a physicist by training. So she is very good on the physics of the grid. If people start talking about I don't know, capacitance or something, she does understand it in a way that I could never dream to. I'm a chemist by training, but yeah, she is really good. I mean, Catherine she's a freelance energy consultant. So she has had to be quite careful about sticking her head above the parapet and saying this is madness, because we live in a society in which people will go out of their way they'll go after your customers if they think you're thinking wrong think. That is quite scary for somebody who's a freelancer. So I think she's now like me. She's sort of reach the stage of life where you go, to hell with it. I'm just I'm going to say what I actually think. And she has been a huge benefit to the skeptic side of the argument, if I like. I mean, we've long been criticized for being a bunch of middle-aged white women, middle-aged white men. So to have a middle-aged, if I can say that about Catherine, probably that's a bad thing to say, a very young woman like Catherine. So, she has been absolutely wonderful. And the media, she's very media friendly. So, she's very good on podcasts and she writes well. So she's got a column in the Daily Telegraph now, which has been great. So yeah, that I think she's a powerful ally.
I want to throw out another name. I wanted to know if you've heard about Lucy Biggers. I just found out about her. She interviewed AOC and she interviewed Greta. She's all on the other side, and now she's all in on our side. She's making tons of content. She's read she's read a lot of books, and she's a very knowledgeable climate skeptic. She's going to be on my podcast soon. I love stories like that, and I think there's more and more of those that people are free to speak their mind. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I must say, I have never heard of Lucy Biggers, so I will look forward to watching that episode. So, I mean, she's doing the climate side rather than the energy side, is she?
She's doing both. Yeah,
she is doing both. Okay, yeah. But she's an American.
She lives in New York City, I think, right now. Yeah, American.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah. I mean, I guess there's less to talk about energy in the States because you have you've got Chris Wright sorting things out at a fairly rapid rate of knots. I'll just going completely off topic here. I saw there was a thing that I noticed recently that Chris Wright's up to, getting the nuclear regulators in the US to look at the linear no threshold theory. Did you notice that?
I did not.
Pick up a lot of attention. Really interesting because this is something that I've been interested in a long time. So just in case you have viewers who don't know what it is, this is the linear no threshold hypothesis is the idea that there is no safe dose of nuclear radiation, and this is why the nuclear industry is so grossly overregulated in most parts of the world. Now, we published a paper back maybe about 2020, something like that, by two scientists. One was an American called Ed Calabrese, who does a lot of research into the history of the linear no threshold hypothesis. And the other author was Mika Paunio, who is a public health official in Finland, who was also a former chairman of their nuclear regulator. And they both approached us. It was an amazing coincidence. Within about a month of each other, both wanting to write about extraordinary evidence that showed that the original scientific studies that had come out in the 1950s and 60s that led to the linear no threshold hypothesis were, well, the particular study that Ed Calabrese was talking about, it was fraudulent. The data had been falsified. The other study that Mika Paunio was talking about, it was just erroneous. They had just made a gross oversight, and that led to them grossly overstating the risk. So we stuck them together and got them to write a paper, thinking this is amazing. This could change things. And of course, the usual story, nothing happens at all. But clearly now Chris Wright has picked up on this and has said, look, guys, nuclear regulators, you need to look at this again. And it's very difficult because the public, they've got this irrational fear. The fear has been drummed into them by environmentalists since the 1950s that if you go anywhere near anything radioactive, you're dead a couple of months later. And you can point out that bananas are radioactive, and that if you live in the UK, Cornwall is radioactive and Aberdeen is radioactive. But again, that's rational, and they're not interested. So if they could come up with enough scientific evidence to prove that the linear no threshold hypothesis was erroneous, and that there is a threshold below which there is no damage to humans, then at that point you get a nuclear renaissance. And essentially the whole argument over fossil fuels probably fades into the background, because everybody would just go, well, nuclear, it'll be cheap. Too cheap to meter, of course, back in the phrase from the 1970s. But it might genuinely be too cheap to meter, at which point, fossil fuels may well fade into the background for large chunks of the economy.
So it's interesting that you mentioned Ed Calabrese, because Steve Malloy mentioned him on my podcast. So then I had Ed on my podcast. And then since then, when Ed has new papers, he sends them to me, the PDF, and I put them up on my Substack. And then I think he has an 11-hour documentary, 22 parts, if I remember right, about this.
I watched some of it.
I watched some of it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He sends me his PDFs all the time as well, and they are really interesting. I mean, it is an absolutely astonishing story that this guy Herman Muller got the Nobel Prize for a fraudulent study, and it's just wow. That does tell you the truth about science. It's done by flawed human beings, and things can go badly wrong.
Yeah, so the idea of Chris Wright looking into it, I had not heard that. I think that's wonderful, fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's quite a change. So yeah, I mean, again, he can say go and look at it again, guys, but that doesn't mean that anything will actually come out of it, because you know what bureaucrats are like. They have a certain amount of inertia. So yeah, maybe nothing will come from it, but maybe good things will.
So I have one other name I want to throw out. It's Montgomery Toms. He's based in London. He's 20 years old. He's going to be my podcast guest this week. But he wears placards talking about the climate change thing being a scam. And he's very based. I wanted to know if you've heard of him or been in contact with him.
Yeah, I haven't been in contact with him, but yeah, I'm aware of him, and I think I follow him on X. So yeah, a very interesting new young voice. And I am really encouraged by the number of new young voices. The young, I think they're looking at my generation, our generation, Tom, and going, these guys have messed up badly. And well, certainly in the UK, I think they're right. We have, and I think we've let them down. And I think the fact that they are willing to stick their heads above the parapet and say these things and get the conversation going does bode very well. But I think there's a lot of pain to go through before people like that get the upper hand and start hopefully putting us back on the road to sanity.
It makes me happy because Bill Nye had some quote about how his side was going to win when the climate skeptics die off of old age. So Bill Nye's pushing 70 right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then now he's going to be waiting for Montgomery Toms to die of old age.
Yeah, no, that's right. So that's right. I think Montgomery Toms will win that one. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that certainly on the net zero battle, the skeptics will win. We're going to win. There's absolutely no doubt about that anymore, just because, our arguments are based in physics and the other side's arguments are based in fairy tales. So, and you can't fool nature, as Richard Feynman said. But as for the climate thing, I think it's more likely that the climate debate will just fade into insignificance, and it will become an obscure corner of academia that nobody really wants to pay any attention to anymore, like phlogiston or something.
It already is, right? I think it has passed the peak.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not what it was. And, they still try to put out these scary headlines, but they don't really have any impact anymore because, the economic pain is in the here and now, and the climate emergency really is alleged to be half a century away. So the other thing that occurs to me is I talked about the effect of Richard Tice's letter on renewables investors, but that kind of thinking of, guys, we're heading for a crisis and you could be in trouble, also applies to people like climate scientists. It's just like, can you imagine that a reform government would continue to throw money at people who are obviously scaremongering? I mean, I have no insights into what Richard Tice's thinking is or Nigel Farage's thinking is, but I mean, it's hard to imagine that they would allow that to continue. So, again, it must be in the interests of climate scientists and, the scientific institutions like the Royal Society and the Institute of Physics to suddenly become much more rational and to stop with the scaremongering and to start behaving like scientists and rational people and letting debate take place. That must be in their interest, because if they carry on, a rational government will put a stop to them. And that it would be sad in a way if the Royal Society got cut off without a penny. But, they're their own worst enemies.
Do you have any insight as to whether Just Stop Oil is going to start throwing stuff on paintings again, or they stopped doing that? Do you think it's going to get revived and these crazy stunts are going to continue 5 years from now or 1 year from now?
It seems to be the way of things, doesn't it? The left sort of funds these sort of astroturf groups that go around doing crazy stuff. I think about the Black Lives Matter stuff in America, and we've got Just Stop Oil here, and before that it was the anti-fracking people here, and yeah, it's noticeable how they disappear once you get a left-wing government. Yes, I would say it is quite likely that that we will see them again. If Reform come to power, or if the Conservatives got back into power, I think we would see them back again. And it would, that will be another very difficult thing for a new government to deal with. I mean, there are all sorts of things. I mean, I've talked about some of the difficulties with reversing out of net zero, when you've got investors who have contracts and things. But yeah, you're going to have to deal with protesters as well. You're going to have to do with the civil service. I mean, the deep state thing is I mean, we don't tend to call it the deep state here, but it is a thing. The civil service, the bureaucracy wants to do their own thing. I mean, the bureaucrats within the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero are, they're ideologues, they're zealots, they are Greens to a man and a woman, and any reforming government that comes in has a major problem in bringing them to heel. The way you do, lots of talk here in the UK now about trying to be more like America. You get a new administration in America and you can just get rid of all the people who you don't think are on your side. And we can't do that here. The thing which I heard a few months ago, which just astonished me, was if you have a government minister here, has his department, a few thousand people, how many of them do you think he can fire? The answer is 3.
Really?
His 3 special advisors, who are essentially he can appoint himself. He can't hire anybody. He can't fire anybody. Essentially, the only government minister who can fire civil servants, and then really it's not very easy, is the prime minister. And of course, you can't have every minister saying, I don't like this civil servant, that. And so that has to change. It's a very difficult situation that we're in. There's so many barriers to fixing the problems we face. We do need somebody with the will to win of a Trump. And we don't obviously have anybody like that at the moment.
So with all the barriers you're talking about, I'm amazed anything ever gets done in the UK. But
this is true. I mean, the country is in my view almost ungovernable at the moment, and because Tony Blair's administration and Gordon Brown's administration created all these barriers essentially to governing properly. So the thing about you can't fire civil servants was that was rules put in by under Gordon Brown, I think it was. And we also have all the stuff like the European Convention on Human Rights that has been interpreted by judges in a way that essentially makes the country ungovernable. So if you try to fix the energy system, well, according to the European judges, there is a right to a stable climate. So you would immediately find yourself challenged in court. You'd be taken to court, and it's just like, this has breached my human right to a stable climate. You want to build a gas-fired power station? No. And so this is all impossible. So one of the things that will have to happen is we will have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights and do away with the Human Rights Act, which brings it into UK law. And that is one of the steps will then be overcome. But then you have all the others, the civil service, and all the rest of it. It's really hard. It's terrifying, the position we face. As I say, ungovernable.
You reminded me that you actually have something called the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero.
Yeah,
it blows my mind. Yeah,
I know it's crazy, isn't it? And let's say that net zero tends to get the priority over energy security. I mean, in fact, energy security is not really on their radar at all. They are just going hell for leather for net zero. And yeah, this is the problem. It's interesting. I keep I keep a close eye on the department, and they are disgraceful. I mean, the information that they put into the public domain is essentially fictional. So I've spent a long time looking at the costs of wind farms. So I'm an accountant by training. After my chemistry degree, I did accountancy. So I'm used to trawling through sets of financial accounts, and you can get all the financial accounts for every single offshore wind farm in the UK, and probably about half of the onshore ones. So I know exactly what it costs to build a wind farm. Now, most of our wind farms are going to be offshore, and the cost for most of the last 10 years has been around £3 million to build a megawatt of offshore wind farm. So £1 billion for a gigawatt, which would be a big wind farm. According to the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, the cost from 2025 onwards was going to be 1.5 million. So the cost was going to fall by 50% between 2023, when they published this paper, and 2025. So there was going to be a technological miracle at some point in those 2 years. Now, there's in fact only going to be one wind farm built or commissioning in 2025. It's called Murray West. And you can see from its financial accounts for 2023 that they'd already spent 1.6 million putting in the foundations. So the idea they're going to do the whole thing for 1.5 was insane. So, of course, and I wrote to the department and said, guys, your numbers are wrong. You'll need to correct it. Questions got asked in Parliament about it, and they just said, "Oh, we'll reply. We'll be in touch." Nothing's changed. They haven't corrected it. But this has major issues because everybody then picks up. Everybody who does estimates the cost of net zero, for example, says, the wind farms are really, really cheap, so it's not going to cost us very much. And of course, if you add in the real costs, it's the same story on the output. They overstate the output by 50% as well, and they understate the maintenance costs by 50%. So their costs are junk, but all the people costing net zero are saying it's going to be really, really cheap. And if you could point out that the wind farm costs are junk, and they don't care. It's just no. The official number is 1.5. So we are talking of differences of hundreds of billions of pounds. But so everything coming out of the department is essentially fictional. We are dealing with a bureaucratic culture that lies without compunction. And it's again, I mean, how do you deal with that? You're just going to have to sack the whole department, I think. I can't see any other way around it.
Why would anyone believe that the cost of putting up industrial wind facilities would drop by 50%? Like Moore's law is going to apply to that?
I have no idea at all. They say things like, "Oh, well, we've got a bottom-up model that looks at technological progress," and it's just nonsense. It's falsified by hard data, but they don't care, and they won't change it.
All right, we're up over our hour here. Do you have any other points you don't want to make before we finish up here?
No, it's been really interesting as ever, Tom. I haven't talked so much for ages, actually. It's been really interesting. So yeah, I mean, if people want to, see what we're up to, you come over to netzerowatch.com. If you can support us, that would be brilliant too. I mean, we're a shoestring operation. We're kind of up to 3 members of staff now, but there is so much more that we could do. So that would be nice if anybody can support us. There's a support page on the website, or drop us a line or something. And just keep up the good fight.
All right, thank you very much. I'm a big fan of your X feed. I need to get over to your website more often, but you're killing it on X. Yeah.
Okay, we'll look forward to seeing you, Tom.